This episode of NSCTV is brought to you by the Ballarat Arms and Military Collective Society, Bushranging in Order, Combined Firearms Council of South Australia, Geelong Firearm Courses, Geraldton Clay Target Club, Liberal Democrats, TSC Sport Australia, and Leonora AAA. Welcome to another episode of NSCTV, and thank you to our Patreon supporters and sponsors for making this possible. Phil Donato is a familiar name in shooting, especially in New South Wales politics, as the first member of the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party elected to the lower house of New South Wales Parliament. Phil also left the party after their leader, Rob Borsak, disgracefully said that he would clock a female member of the SSFP and refused but calls by his members to stand aside as party leader. In this episode, we speak with Phil about how he got involved in politics, what he thinks about the New South Wales Registry, and what he's been able to achieve in that time. We also look at the results of the last New South Wales election, which saw Phil returned with a convincing win over the Nationals and his former party. So stay with us. Okay, so I've got Phil Donato with me, member for Orange. How are you doing, Phil?
Yeah, good, thanks, Neil. I'm really well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good, thanks. So Phil, member for Orange in New South Wales. And I think you're quite well known in shooting circles, but for those who may not be familiar, just very quickly, I remember you appeared on Endless Pursuit Hunting Podcast, I think it was called, and you gave a bit of a rundown of your background in shooting. You grew up on a farm and shot there. Just very briefly, do you just want to tell us a little bit about your shooting involvement?
Yeah, look, I suppose I started getting involved with shooting and hunting from a young age, going with my father and uncles and shooting, from about the age of about 8 or 9, I guess, accompanying them on trips out to family, friends, properties and farms around the place and shooting small game like rabbits and ducks and hares. And I suppose that sort of sparked my interest. And then that's actually just sort of developed over time into other larger game, foxes, pigs, goats, and deer as well. So it was something I really enjoyed doing, spending time with my family and getting out in the outdoors with my dad and my uncles, and not just the shooting and hunting side of things, but also learning a little bit about life in the bush and bushcraft and all those types of things, processing your own food and all those things that sort of went with it as well, which I come from an Italian background, and it was sort of a fundamental thing that our families had done for generations. Both my grandfathers and were keen shooters, shotgun shooters back then. They love their small game, as most Italians did or still do. And that sort of just, generated that way and just sort of evolved over the years, I guess. And, now I still enjoy some small game hunting when I get a chance. It's quite fun, shooting rabbits or something like that, where you get to shoot a number of shots in an afternoon or morning, but obviously also enjoy my deer hunting when I get time to go away and do that.
Yeah, cool. And you landed in Orange, courtesy of the New South Wales Police Force.
Yeah, that's right. So I was a member of the police force for over 2 decades, and that's what brought me to Orange. In fact, is my wife and my 5 young boys at the time. We were looking at getting out of Sydney and relocating to a regional centre and giving my kids a bit of a appreciation and upbringing in a regional town, and that's something that I enjoyed doing as a kid. Not that I grew up in the bush, but I spent a lot of time in the bush. But so nearly 20 years ago, I got a transfer in the police force. I was a police prosecutor and had been doing that for a number of years in Sydney, and used to do a lot of relieving trips out into the bush and into the regions as well, and quite enjoyed that different type of prosecutorial experience. And the opportunity came to come to Orange, and we had some connections here. My wife's brother was living here at the time, and we used to come and visit and enjoyed the area. And then fortunately an opportunity came up, and I applied for a position and was transferred here and been here ever since.
Yep. Okay. And you're not alone in terms of your shooting interests. There's a few clubs in that area as well. I think you were giving me a list the other day of what you've got.
Yeah. There's Canoggla's Hunting Club, which I'm a member of. There's also the Orange Clay Target Club, the Orange Pistol Club, the SSAA range here in Orange as well, Rimfire range. St Neville House range, it's called. It's had a long history here in Orange, and there's also a number of other ranges across the electorate out at parks and Forbes, as well, gun clubs and SSAA ranges as well. So obviously in the bush, shooting is a sport that enjoyed by lots and lots of people, and those clubs are represented right across my electorate. So I'll get out there and shoot when I can. I've done a few shoots at the Clay Target Club, for example, or the Rimfire range, and a few other clubs. But yeah, look, I still think shooting and hunting is still a popular pastime and activity in certainly this part of the world, in the Central West and Central Tablelands, and enjoyed by lots of people. And the Canobolas Hunting Club, which I'm a member of, has, I think it's 150 odd members, and they organise a few club hunts every year, and they're quite an active club as well, which is terrific. So it's great to be involved with those associations.
You can support the NSC's legal actions by becoming a donor at nationalshooting.org.au. Then there was the lure of politics that brought you into that sphere. Why did you do that? Why did you get involved?
Yeah, I suppose, politics is always something that I had a bit of an interest in. I never sort of grew up wanting to be a politician, far from it. But an opportunity arose, and I suppose through my work and experience I had in the courtroom and the police force and legislation and debating and arguing matters in court with magistrates and solicitors and barristers and all sorts of things, it sort of gave me a fairly reasonable insight into legislation and legal arguments and making submissions and public speaking and all those things. And I was always heavily involved in the local community. Like I said earlier, my wife and I got 5 boys or 5 sons, and they were always heavily involved in sport and local community things. So I was always inevitably coaching or running those the boys around, and whether it was rugby union or cricket or AFL or soccer or whatever it was, I was always coaching or heavily involved. So I had a bit of I suppose affiliation and association with the community through that aspect of things, but also through my work. And an opportunity came in 2016. At the time, the coalition under the premiership of Mike Baird decided to ban greyhound racing, which was quite controversial at the time. And I remember waking up to the news, hearing on the radio, that the greyhound ban had passed legislation that it was going to be basically banned. And I just thought to myself, and this was 2016, I think it was, or 15, 16, whenever it was, and I thought, that's pretty rough, right? I thought, not that I had any interest or affiliation with greyhounds, but I could draw the parallels between greyhound racing, firearms ownership. And I thought, I'm sure there's a lot of good people in the greyhound industry, and it's their livelihoods, it's their hobby, it's their recreation. Many of them have been doing it for generations. And to have it banned overnight by a government, I just thought was a stretch too far. And it just, like I said, I thought, well, there's nothing stopping them if there was something to happen in the shooting or firearms space. They do the same sort of thing, right? And so I drew that sort of parallel, and that's how I could sort of relate to it. And I thought, well, I think that's, by all means, you get rid of the bad people, you punish those people, get them out of the industry, but don't close down the entire industry and ban something on the basis of a minority of people. So I suppose that sort of sparked my interest. And then there was a period of time where, and it was just timing, right? I was quite fortunate. Right place, right time, as often is in life. There was a by-election happening in Orange because our sitting state member had vacated the seat, was elected into the federal parliament. So there was about 8 or 9 months, or nearly 12 months, in fact, where there was no local state member while they were waiting the by-election. So that gave an opportunity for someone like myself, I suppose, who got involved. At the time, I ran with the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. And that was on the basis that, I'd always voted for those guys in the upper house because I was being a firearms owner. And they were quite adamant in their association supporting the greyhound industry and council mergers, which was also another thing that was happening at the time, forced amalgamations. But I suppose perfect storm, right place, right time. I put my hand up to run, and then it sort of just organically happened, right? I had some, and I didn't expect to win. I had the National Party held the seat by about 23 or 24% margin. They'd held the seat since World War II, 1947 or something. You know, it was one of their safest seats in the nation. And you know, in my heart, I didn't expect to win the seat. I thought, well, if we could make it a marginal seat, give them a good run, send a strong message to the government that, you know, you can't go doing this sort of thing. You can't just go and destroying people's livelihoods on the basis of a few bad eggs. But like I said, the likes of Alan Jones and Ray Hadley got behind me, which just organically happened. No doubt provided me a lot of support and a huge platform, and I'm forever grateful to those guys for their support. Paul Murray as well, to a lesser extent. And this area where we live in the Central West has a strong affiliation with the greyhound communities. We've got a lot of greyhound trainers and breeders in this area. Some of the best in Australia come from, you know, Orange and the surrounding districts. And forced council amalgamations was also a big issue at the time that was going to impact this region as well. So I suppose the fact that you're having a by-election where you haven't got an incumbent returning in or running, the fact that you had those two big major local issues, the greyhound and the forced council mergers, and I suppose, you know, I've been around and involved in the community for a number of years as well, and we were fortunate enough to get across the line by 50 votes, I think it was, at the end of the day, and biggest swing, I think, at the time in New South Wales and potentially Australian political history, you know, to overthrow the National Party. And it took 8 or 9 days of counts and recounting, and but fortunately, like I said, I was lucky. You know, the planets aligned, the timing was right, things worked out for me.
I'll compare that margin of 50 votes to the margin at the last election a little bit later. So okay,
I think I had. Sorry, then. I was going to say, I think I had the most marginal seat when I got elected. It was the margin I had in 2016 was 0.01%. The most marginal in Parliament.
Okay, so then you and Roy and Helen Dalton and others actually got in around the same time, probably on similar issues.
Yeah, they got elected. So I got elected in November of 2016. They got elected that was a by-election. So then we had about 2 years, a bit over 2 years before the next general election, which was March of 2019, which saw Helen Dalton elected in Murray under the Shooters, Fishers, Farmers Party, and Roy Butler elected as a member for Barwon, which was also with the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. So we went from having none to having 3 members in the Legislative Assembly in the space of, you know, a bit over 2 years, right? And that was a huge accomplishment for a fairly for a party founded on, you know, firearms ownership, fishing and farming.
Okay. And sorry to wind forward here, but Rob Borzak and others had, I think, pretty chuffed because, you know, the dream was coming up, and then the dream came down.
It did.
Now, look, we'll get onto that in a second. Just before we do, what would you list as probably the main top 3 achievements that you're able to obtain during that period time between
2016 and 2019? The top 3 achievements. Geez, well, it was tough going. I was the only member of the party in the Legislative Assembly. The Nationals absolutely threw everything to try and win the seat back in the 2019 election, and it was they were always coming into the electorate making announcements to try and, you know, obviously and excluding me and not including the local members. So they'd come in and they'd say, you know, we're gonna do this or we're gonna do that. Or the biggest one, I suppose, the biggest ticket item was, you know, Gladys Berejiklian, who was then the Premier, came to Orange before the 2019 election.
Because they were doing it in government.
Yeah, they were in government. That's right. And said, we're going to build a $25 million sports stadium for Orange, only on the proviso, though, that you vote for a Nationals candidate, which didn't go down too well because, you know, I said, well, it's just a bribe. You can't bribe people to force them to vote one way or the other. So that backfired hugely. And, you know, we're getting the stadium built now. It's taken a while, but it's now blown out to $60 million, right? So that's probably one of the biggest accomplishments in the time. There was a whole range of different things that we're able to fight for and get delivered for the Orange electorate. I've got a great staff and team that work here. It's not just me; they do a lot of work behind the scenes, and we get some wonderful achievements. But getting better palliative care services for Orange was one of the big things that we fought for, and we're still fighting for. But it has improved compared to where we were when I first started, which was nothing. We've seen hundreds of millions of dollars spent across Orange and the Central West. There was a special activation precinct that went out to Parks, because Parks and Forbes are also in this electorate as well. They got some significant investment into those areas, and I suppose the coalition who were in government at the time to try and win the seat back leading up to the 2019 election threw hundreds of millions of dollars into this electorate to try and win it back, and also other parts of regional New South Wales as well. But I'm not in government. I don't have the access to the Treasury, but I can fight for my community. I can stand up. I can speak out. I can represent them. I can call the government out when they need to be called out, and I'll give them credit when they deserve credit as well. But I think regional people, especially, they'd like to see someone go in the bat for them and fight for them and speak up for them, and someone that they feel is approachable, accessible, and available to them. Because up until that point in time, the sitting members were pretty comfortable in these seats. They had huge margins. They could be pretty complacent, pretty arrogant, pretty lazy at times. So when I got elected, that all got spun on its head. But no doubt the work that myself and my team had done here in Orange, we had some big achievements in terms of exposing the government to a primary producer registration rip-off scheme that had been going for 20 odd years, where farmers and primary producers had been overcharged by governments for 2 decades by both sides of government because of some algorithm issue in the software of the computer. And both governments knew about it, but decided not to tell the public or tell the customers that they'd been overcharged for 20 odd years. And that week, I exposed that. I had a whistleblower come and speak to me from Transport, and I exposed it. And as a result, the government had to reimburse over, I think it was about $120 odd million to farmers and primary producers. And this was at a time during the drought, so they were being deliberately fleeced in the time of drought. So, some of the farmers I know who had multiple vehicles, for example, got $20,000, $30,000 refunded to them from, basically to recompense them for the years and years of being overcharged. And then they got free rego as well. So the drought was happening at that time. So there was freight subsidies. So I think a lot of the stuff I did here in Orange was also resonated across other parts of regional New South Wales, especially the more remote parts. So, it wasn't, and we had great candidates in Helen Dalton and Roy Butler as well, which makes a huge difference. And I think it just lined up and we were able to get another 2 members elected in 2019.
You can support NSCTV by becoming a subscriber at nsctv.com.au. And unfortunately, yes, it did come to an end.
The bubble burst. The bubble did burst. And look, there's always, I suppose we grew very quickly. There was some issues behind the scenes, which I won't go into here, but there was issues behind the scenes which were raised with it leading up to the last election by myself, Roy Butler, with Robert Borzak. Anyway, we asked him to step aside and not contest the election in 2023 for various reasons. He chose not to. We went to an AGM, a party AGM. We tried to put our reasons to the membership as to why we think the party needed to go a certain direction. Ultimately, the executive, the state executive, and also the delegates at the branch meeting who had votes voted against what Roy and I were pushing. We lost the vote 12-9, and they wanted to keep this current status quo. The majority of members keep this current state executive as it was, comprising of Robert Borzak's son and 3 of his close mates, and to keep ultimately Robert Borzak in Parliament. I'd raised legitimate concerns over comments he made about Helen Dalton, who'd left the party 12 months or so earlier. Pretty disappointing, the comments he made towards her in the chamber that were captured on audio. And it left me with a position where it was untenable to continue running under the leadership of Robert Borsak or the party. So both myself and Roy Butler resigned from the party. Helen Dalton had resigned over other issues about 12 months earlier or thereabouts. So it went. The bubble did burst, and which led to myself, Roy, and Helen all contesting the election in March 2023 as independents.
Yeah, yes, and this is, I think, where it gets even more interesting. The results from the election. Now, obviously, there are other factors at play.
Yeah,
but you all got elected quite strongly.
Yeah.
And what I'm just going to do is quickly pull up the results for your seat, because they are, I think, quite incredible. So this is your electorate of Orange, and there are 8 horses in the race.
Greyhounds.
You got 53.
53% of the primary vote. Yeah, that's right.
No need to distribute preferences because the race was already won.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of things here. One was the 50 votes that you originally won by. Your next nearest competitor is the Nationals. You've got 26,000. They've got 11,000. So from 50 votes to 15,000. And after that, they threw the money into your electorate. They came in, they ignored you. And as you said, the electorate was not, people are not stupid.
No, they're not. They're not stupid.
And
that's right.
They may be a little bit naive in some cases. They may not have caught up on the news, but if you treat them like fools, they will respond. Yeah. No, look, it even exceeded my expectations this last election. 53% of the primary vote. Last in 2019, they got 49% of the primary vote, so it actually increased by a few percent there, 4% or thereabouts. Which was, it was very satisfying doing it as an independent, completely self-funding the campaign, organising it ourselves. And, you're always in the back of your mind, you're thinking, traditionally up until that point, the campaigns have been run by the party, they've been managed by the party and organised and funded by a party. And so, they didn't have the resources that the party structure that provides this time around. But I think it just goes to show, obviously, being an incumbent, you do a lot of work on the ground, you attend a lot of functions, you talk to lots of people, and you go in the bat for people and you work hard. And I think that sort of proves that in those results. And same as Roy and Helen, I think they both got swings to them as well. I think Helen got over 50% of the primary vote, and the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party actually were preferencing the National Party in her seat, which is disappointing. But anyway, that was the way they decided to roll. But they also ran in Orange, and they also ran in Barwon, the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, which I don't think ended too well for them. Yeah, their vote in Orange was 5%.
Yeah. Well, when you think about, it went from 49% in 19 to 5% in 2023.
Stop gloating.
I'm not saying it. In fact.
So just going forward, in terms of shooters' interest in New South Wales, what are the key issues and what do you see as the direction that we're going in New South Wales?
Yeah, look, I think obviously I hear a lot about registry issues, the firearms registry, delays in processing of applications, renewals, people being refused a renewal based on a box that they've ticked, even though they may have had a license in the past. If they picked that they're were a member of the armed forces, for example, or if they had some sort of medical condition or whatever the case may be. And they're now having to go through a number of hoops to try and satisfy the registry that they're a fit and proper person as accordance with the Act, which lengthy delays in processing, issues in relation to range compliance. Only last week I had a range in my electorate where the registry had closed them down because they were saying they didn't satisfy the requirements. And this is a range that's been in existence for over 50 years in terms of the fallout and templates and all this sort of stuff. So I hear a lot of complaints from rangers in relation to audits that are being conducted by the registry and are now required to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in earthworks to lift up embankments or whatever the case may be, when there's never been an issue or a complaint or a problem in the past. So they're a couple of the main ones I hear about on a weekly basis, I'd have to say. There wouldn't be a week goes by where I haven't got a licensed firearms owner writing to me about issues they're having with the registry. Some of the other issues, obviously, insofar as I suppose, the 28-day cooling off period, or when you put in a permit to acquire, especially after you've already got a firearm, I don't see why you need to wait, the cooling off period and the lengthy time for a PTA for any second or subsequent firearms. I think that just sort of defeats the purpose and the objective of the legislation, to be honest.
Now, just in terms of the way forward, Yasmin Catley is the Police Minister, Labor Police Minister.
Yeah.
How would you rate her in terms of dealing with issues?
Yeah. Look, I've had a couple of meetings with her already. About myself and Roy Butler, we had a couple of meetings with her in the last few weeks of Parliament. And look, so far she's been very good. She hasn't got a policing background like myself or Roy. Roy worked for the New South Wales Police Force in an unsworn capacity, in a HR sort of role before. But no, look, she's willing to listen. We've got an open door with her. She's happy to help us. And, so I've spoken to her already about and written to her a number of times already since she's been the minister in relation to registry issues. So we've firmly put it on her radar that needs to be closely monitored, the running of the registry, how it operates. And really, I believe they're there to provide a service, but it feels like their service delivery could be a lot better, if I can be blunt. So, she's aware of those issues, and she's come from Swansea, which is, on the central coast of New South Wales. So, look, so far it's been really good, our conversations with her, like I said, so we'll just have to wait and see. But, Paul Toole was the previous police minister, who was a member for Bathurst and was the leader of the National Party. And I wrote to him ad nauseum in relation to complaints about the registry, and he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing.
He was
He was with the Nationals. Yeah, did nothing.
Yeah.
Did nothing for, in terms of trying to improve the registry or trying to make it more service orientated for their dealings with license applications and license owners. And, so anything's got to be better than what he provided.
Well, I've got this view that Labor's not our friend.
Yeah.
But the National, unfortunately, I think the track record shows the coalition has probably been worse for us, as much as it sticks my call.
Yeah. Well, look, it's still early days with this government, this Labor government here in New South Wales. But the Liberal Nationals, I can tell you, when they were in power, they didn't do anything. The ammo bill came into New South Wales under them. The appearance laws came into New South Wales under them. So I don't know if one's better than the other. I think they're probably both the same, really. That's where it's important. And we've seen what's happening over in WA. It's important to have members, and although I'm no longer with the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, I'm a licensed firearms owner. I've got an interest in ensuring that, sure, there's got to be laws, there's got to be rules, but let's apply them fairly and moderately and honest, in a reasonable fashion. Let's not make firearms owners, some sort of group of people that we don't want to deal with or don't want to listen to or don't want to engage with. Let's work with them. Let's try and be productive with them. Let's use them as a solution to some of the problems and engage with them, because up until now, that hasn't happened.
Yeah. Okay, Phil, look, thank you for that. I appreciate your time.
No worries, mate. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of NSCTV. Now, Phil also spoke in Parliament about the passing of Prince Philip a couple of years ago. In his contribution, he said, Prince Philip didn't mince his words. He delivered it straight. He leaves his heirs who will continue his traditions of a love of shooting, hunting and the outdoors. We celebrate His Royal Highness Prince Philip's life and his steadfast and loyal service to the Queen and the Commonwealth. Prince Philip will be fondly remembered by his fellow shooters, hunters and outdoor men and women for whom he advocated. You can read the full contribution in the link in the description to this video. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe to our channel now and make sure your mates do as well. We'll see you later.